Dr. Amy Johnson, welcome to the Rich Equation podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
I'm super excited. I think you are probably the first PhD psychologist I've had on the podcast, and we spent a lot of time talking about mindset and mental health as an entrepreneur. I think it's relevant in all aspects of society today, whether you're an adult or a kid. So I'm really excited to have a subject matter expert today to go deep on the mind and our narratives, our stories, our routines, and why we do what we do. So just really honored that you're here.
Yes, thank you.
So you're a psychologist, and you also have a podcast, and you have a coaching business, you're an author. Tell us a little bit about your world before we get lost in some other topics here.
Yeah, so I love this stuff. From the time I was little, I suspected I would be a psychologist. I don't even know if I really knew what that was, but I was hiding in my room reading self-help books that I found that my mom had hidden in her drawer, reading like Wayne Dyer and just different spiritual books, different self-help books. And I just love this stuff, mindset stuff, all of that from the time I was really young. So yeah, I made it my profession. And then along the way, I struggled with quite a bit of anxiety. I struggled with eating disorder. And that was really huge for me because it kind of, forced me to keep looking a lot deeper than the stuff I had just been learning in school and really dive into this in a big way, free myself. And so that's when, I feel like I saw a lot through my own personal experience and now can share that with my clients.
Do you feel like there's a really big difference in the either clinical education and application of psychology or mental health versus what all these, I don't even want to call them coaches, but like the Wayne Dyers, the Abraham Hicks, the Tony Robbins, this new thought wave of in the last 30, 40 years of mindset and, just watching your thoughts and all that kind of stuff. Do you think there is a nice alignment of clinical application and clinical education, or is it completely different than what you kind of learn in school and what you're normally supposed to teach?
It's pretty different. I wish it was more aligned, but it's not. Yeah, I think traditional psychology, unfortunately, is just kind of old paradigm in a lot of ways. It's really working from this medical model that was passed down to it, that there's a problem and the problem needs a fix. And unfortunately, people are in a hurry to just fix a problem the fastest, cheapest way they can, which usually means medication. And these things that we call problems are yes, they feel like problems, they create problems, but in themselves, they aren't problems. So something like anxiety, for example, we feel anxious thoughts. That is feedback. Like that is safe too. We are designed to feel a variety of stuff, and it is beautiful feedback when we know how to read it, but we don't know how to read it. We get shuttled off to some psychiatrist that writes a prescription, and then we wonder why my anxiety went away with the meds, but now I'm depressed or now I'm drinking too much or whatever, and so I do feel like, the kind of, I don't know how you classify it, but there's a lot of people out there looking at a deeper direction. And I think it's massively like more helpful.
And it's a big movement. Now the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, just the medical model of things just doesn't resonate with a lot of people. Thinking that you're broken and coming, even though we feel broken sometimes, it doesn't feel good, and it doesn't really resonate to really see ourselves that way. And I think a lot of people are just wanting to just kind of look forward, which is what coaching has always done, and this is generalizing for sure, but psychology is kind of, historically kind of looked backward and tried to make sense of things. And I think a lot of people, when coaching became popular, were like, enough, I don't need to rehash everything. Like, tell me how to move ahead.
Well, I want to talk specifically about two things that I'm kind of facing or dealing with right now, and not just myself, but some of the people that I'm spending time with and their families and all that. So first one is, I think that entrepreneurs very specifically deal with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I think us entrepreneurs, we often we kind of build this resilience to like keep running through walls until we can't. And then we fall and collapse and get crushed. And then we have to learn how to build ourselves up again. I'd love you to talk about sort of tools or things that you're seeing in that mindset. Because me personally, I feel like, we're bred a certain way for so long, and we're programmed a certain way for so long. And that narrative or that story gets us to wherever we get, and then we fall. Then we either get tired, or maybe something dramatic happens in your life and it gets you off kilter. And then every major entrepreneur or every successful entrepreneur that I've ever met has had a really dark, deep story, right? Something that has gone wrong, either a loss of a family member or a bankruptcy or something dramatic for them to then wake up. And I think that makes that journey of ups and downs is healthy, and it's good for learning. But like, how can we deal with these? And I don't think it's always internal. I think there's external aspects too that we allow in. I'll at least say that we allow that stuff in. What advice you have for people, entrepreneurs and people that are trying to maybe push the envelope and really excel in life and do maybe the unnormal things in managing mindset and mental health? Because it's so important, so critical.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I recently heard that most, huge percentage of entrepreneurs have divorced parents, or that kind of like you're saying, there's something early on there's almost this attitude of like, I'll show you.
There's like a chip. Oh yeah, there's a chip on our shoulder. Yes. Oh yeah, for sure.
I thought that was so fascinating, and it matches my experience too. And I think so it's like what happens, I think, is yes, our minds decide early on, like, okay, here's how I'm going to never feel that again, whatever that is. There's something scary that happens when we're young, and our mind decides, here's how I'll get around that. We're never going to feel that again. And then it kind of creates a personality and a drive and coping mechanisms and everything you're saying, a way to succeed. Some people succeed because they're nice, others because they're smart, others because they never give up, whatever it might be. In that moment, our mind kind of starts going to work to create that for us. And it's beautiful in a way, because it helps us feel good, and it kind of gives us a bit of an identity. But just like you're saying, it's gonna hit a wall. I mean, everything that's helpful is only helpful to a certain point, and then it becomes like a shackle. So then we keep hitting these walls, and now we have these, and we're like, well, now what? Like, this is what got me this far. And like you said, I love seeing that it is good for learning. And I think this is a metaphor that probably shows up in all of life. Something helps, and then it doesn't help anymore. And that forces us to kind of take the next step, or something bad happens again, and that forces us to kind of keep growing through it. So I think just what seems helpful for me is just people having a sense of that, rather than just blindly being like, why do I keep hitting these walls? To kind of see, well, because you're using all the best resources you have up to that point. And then those resources don't work anymore. And that's beautiful, because that's inviting you to look a little deeper and to see even more, and to maybe expand your way of succeeding in life. If it's just hustle, 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 I can out hustle anyone, well, that's not sustainable. So you better hit a wall so that you can grow past that and see different ways. So I think just having that bird's eye view of what you're describing, and seeing that every human, especially entrepreneurs in some notable ways, but everyone goes through their own version of this, can be super helpful, because then at least when we're in it, it doesn't feel personal. We're not so blindsided by it.
What are better questions to be asking ourselves when we hit that? I find myself, when I'm in that season, I ask the wrong questions. Like, what's wrong with me? How do I get back to where I was? How do I exert more, right? Who do I need to talk to that will get me back on track? Yeah. What are the right questions to be asking that are perhaps more curious and more self-compassionate? Because I think entrepreneurs are really hard on themselves. And I want to talk about kids in a second.
Yeah. So, right. What's wrong with me? Not a great question.
Not a great question.
Not great. How do I get back to where I was? Also not a great question, because it's not about getting back. It's
I'm 0 for 2.
Yeah. You're not so good so far. I think like, what is there to see here? like genuine, this is going to maybe sound a little woo woo, but like genuinely asking and then noticing what you're shown, because I think we can ask that question and we will be shown things. What more is there to see? Like, what was I not seeing before that I need to see now? And it might come in the way of another challenge or an idea or meeting a person, who knows, right? But like, what else is there to see here? What was I not seeing before? What's needed now? So forget the past. It doesn't matter. And that's hard sometimes for successful people, because we feel kind of clingy to what we think has brought us the success. But I think we need to see that's not lost. It's tapping into the bigger energy of life that brings people success. We're not going to lose that. We almost succeed despite our mindset more than because of it, because we're super creative by nature. As a species, we're super creative. We have fresh ideas all the time. If anything, humans tend to get in their way with that, almost more than anything. So kind of like, okay, whatever was helpful in the past, it'll show up if it's needed now, and it'll be there. But what else? Like, what's needed for this next leg of the journey? And I feel like that does something. It kind of allows you to look forward with a very clear mind, like you're looking into an empty space, rather than bringing the past with you, which is just an idea at this point, and trying to make the past work for you now, which is just too messy.
Yeah. And then on top of that, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, including myself, we've created a lot of identity attachment to all the things that we build and do and create, and who we are, and the people that we know, et cetera, the groups that we're in, et cetera. And I feel like I'm in a season right now where I need to learn how to say no to things, to open up what I don't know doesn't exist, right? Like the next season of opportunity is perhaps not going to happen if I drag all the heavy garbage from the past into whatever the next season is. So now I got to start making some hard choices of what am I going to start saying no to? What are the things I shouldn't be doing that I've attached myself to for so long?
Yes, I think that's so big. And I kind of love to do that in my business, although I don't love to do it, but I love to think about it. But I always go into this mindset of like, okay, let's pretend everything just exploded. So like we can't advertise here. We can't do that thing that worked. Like we're just burning this to the ground and we're going to rebuild it fresh. We don't actually do that, but just to kind of play that mental game a little bit, I think it allows you to do what you're saying. It's like, if we're not tethered to anything, like what new shows up?
Yeah. And I want to talk about kids, because do you work with a lot of kids?
I work with teens and young adults, not little kids.
Yeah, that's what I meant. So I have 2 young daughters, 3 and 5. And so I'm not quite dealing with this, but I have another friend who also has 2 daughters that are in the teens. And he was expressing to me this concept of, his older daughter is really suffering from this sense of belonging in school. And she is a strong, independent woman, doesn't give 2 rats about what other people think. But the moment she goes to school, she doesn't feel, and she's, they're minority, right? So when they go to school, they look different, they act different, and they're not part of the popular kids. And so there's this sense of wanting to be accepted and being not accepted, I guess, is really affecting her. And she's kind of suffering through that and going through that. And I feel like that's true with adults too. And we were having a good conversation about it, because they're not on social media. And I think social media somehow stimulates more of this kind of, what do I belong to? And am I making my own choices? Am I not? And I was kind of jokingly telling him, well, it sounds like she's going to be a future entrepreneur, kind of on her own, the 3%er. Yeah. But what are you seeing right now, and how are people dealing with this? I think there's also a truth that parents are sort of not prepared for this type of age, because I still have young ones, but I didn't grow up with this, and my parents didn't have to deal with this. So I'm a little unprepared on how I'm going to have to deal with this impact to them. Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I have a 13-year-old daughter, so I'm kind of there.
So you're there, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yes, for sure. the more opportunities there are for them to see things that lead them to think I don't belong, or I don't look like that, or that's not my life. It's just hard. And I think as much as we have been talking about, hopefully kids are getting some message that like social media is not life. It's a little different than life. Of course, we know how much we listen to our parents at that age, not at all. So, we can tell them that all we want, and it still is hitting home. Like, it's so true. And it's a weird one, the whole belonging thing, because it's like, it's hardwired into us.
I have that even as an adult. So you're right.
Yes. It never goes away, but it's one of those things, kind of like you were saying earlier, like we were talking about the different patterns of like survival and our ways of getting forward in life and stuff. I think these acceptance, belonging, all of that stuff is going to show up. But the more we can kind of know, I think of it as almost like it's like a psychological program that's embedded in the brain of every human that's ever lived. And so it's real and we feel it real, but it isn't personal. And that feels really huge. It's like we can be pretty much guaranteed. And again, I'm not saying our 13 and 15-year-old girls are going to hear this, but hopefully they will a little bit, that yes, your mind will tell you you're not good enough, you don't belong. And literally every other girl in school, even the popular girls, their minds are telling them the same version of that. And we can be honest with our kids and say, yeah, my mind does that. I look at somebody else's business or what someone else has, and my mind will go there. But that's what minds do. That's what brains do. Brains are programmed with that. They come pre-programmed with that program. So it is not personal. And although it'll come up and it'll feel personal, we can kind of have a relationship with that in a way, like, oh, I see you. I know what this is. And again, I'm not saying it's going to save us from every bit of suffering. It's not. But again, suffering isn't the enemy, right? Suffering makes us, a little bit of suffering makes us, kind of propels us forward and shows us new things. So it's not to save them from the hardships of being a teenager, because I don't think we can do that. But even in the adults I work with, I think that's huge, is seeing, oh, this is just what my brain says. And it's what my brain is supposed to be saying, because it thinks it's protecting me by comparing me to everyone else. It's just not, it's not helpful.
Yeah. Comparing yourself to others, man, it's like the worst. It's like the worst program.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to delete that
program. Do you know what I mean? I know, and we can't delete it, but imagine like having that program come up. It's like some pop-up that comes up on your computer that you're not going to click on, but it just shows up. It's a little annoying, but after a while, you're not compelled by it. You're not going to click on it. You're just going to close the little thing in the corner and make it go away. And like, we can kind of start to see our programs in a similar way. Like, yeah, I figured you'd be here. I'm starting a new venture. I'm meeting new people. I'm going to a networking event. I figured some of this crap would be here, some of this insecurity, some of this comparison, but I don't, I don't have to like take it so seriously.
Yeah, I take life very seriously. So I love the sort of being kind, curious, like, oh, okay, yeah, I kind of expected you to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think there's also something to be said about like eliminating the things that help enable that thought or those thinking, right? Like, so being on social media more or less, or, doing things with people that empower you and not make you feel those feelings, I suppose.
Yeah.
But just being aware is half the battle, right?
Yes. At least half, I would say. Yeah. And not fighting, that's the thing about having that relationship with it, where it's like, okay, I know you always come to these events with me, it just, the resistance isn't there. And feelings are designed to come up. Feelings are just energy. It's like, it's just going to come up and it's going to dissipate. Now, when a feeling comes up and we're like, oh no, I'm insecure and I'm comparing and how's this going to go? And then we're trying to push it down. That's where it's like a beach ball underwater. And then it just really starts to affect our judgment and our creativity and all of that. When we're just like, okay, you're fine. You can be here. I can still go be creative. I can still talk to people, even with this in the background. It's amazing how that kind of zaps it, because it isn't getting fueled by all that resistance.
Do you encourage people to meditate to find that awareness of thoughts, or is it just exercise, or how are you, what do you feel like is the right way to do that?
I think it's different for everyone. Some people will love to meditate, some will hate it, and same with any technique. Ultimately, though, it's whatever gives us some insight into what's going on there. I know it's a very vague answer, but for me, I don't formally meditate, but I do a lot of inquiry. Like I'll notice my mind hounding on a story, and then I'm not going to hound it back. I'm not going to even get into a discussion with it, but I'm like, wow, there you go again, telling me how the future is going to look, as if a mind can know how the future is going to look, or there you go again, rehashing that old thing. And it just kind of like changes your relationship with it. So anything like that, which can include meditation or, I think anything we find that works for us is great.
What is your sort of daily routine? You have a practice, you have a coaching business, you're a podcaster. What is sort of your daily routine? What are your habits and behaviors?
I love my daily routine. I don't typically start till later. Yeah. So I'm a first right out of the gate exerciser kind of person, because if I think about it, I won't do it, or I won't want to. So I'm one of those people, I have to roll out of bed and just go right into it, or else it's likely to not happen. So my mornings are my favorite. So I get up and work out, and then I get to have my coffee and check my email while I'm kind of getting the kids off to school and all that. And then I usually kind of officially start my day with clients and stuff around 9:30, 10. And I'm training coaches, I'm leading groups and coaching people that way. And it's just really fun. It's so cool that and working on my business, which I enjoy, but I don't enjoy as much as actually doing my business. So that's one thing I've really been conscious about, is seeing where my limitations are as an entrepreneur, and really trying to get people that are way smarter than me at the running the business piece of things. And that's gone a long way in the last 3 years. So I still have a big role in things, but I don't have to make daily decisions, and even the big picture decisions I weigh in on, but I want to hear from other people because I just want to do my piece, and I think that was always the dream, and it's not perfect or anything, but it's nice to start to be kind of moving toward that a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. And it's a good point for all entrepreneurs, is like, and you are the brand too, and yet you've sort of delegated all of the business decisions to others so that you can really focus on your magic, right?
Yes. Yeah. Including things like social media, right? Because personally, I don't want to be there either. But
I don't want to be on social media either.
Our brand wants to be there, but we don't want to.
Yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. What's coming up for you with your clients right now? What are some of the challenges people are facing, and what's going on right now?
It's interesting. It kind of, things seem to go in phases, and I don't know what that is, just what's happening in the world and all of that. Obviously, through COVID and after COVID, there was a big spike in a lot of habits and anxiety and stuff like that. And I feel like it was a time that some people really suffered, obviously, but even those that really suffered kind of had this opportunity to look at things in a new way, like we all did. And for entrepreneurs, especially, right? It's like for many of us, not so much for me because my business has always been online, but for a lot of people, it's like, okay, we cannot do things the way we could. It's not even a choice anymore. So it's like we had to burn everything down and kind of start fresh in a lot of ways. And I think even regular people, non-entrepreneurs, we all faced a lot of this after COVID, of like certain aspects, or just even how I deal with things. They couldn't just run out and go buy comfort foods, or they couldn't just go spend time with friends. And so there was a whole shifting in kind of how we are with our own experience that feels like it is healthy, or it's going to be as we kind of get used to it.
A lot of people, you mean that people kind of suffered to find that equilibrium?
Yeah, I think many people did. Yeah, because the regular things they could just reach out and do weren't available.
Breaks a lot of patterns.
Yes, it broke a lot of patterns. And some people just grabbed for the next best thing. But a lot of people were like, hey, or at least they're coming to see it now, like this is an opportunity to actually break that pattern and find a healthier way of being. Kind of like what we were saying before, when you hit a wall in your business or whatever, right? Like that is a breaking of a pattern, but it gives us a chance to see better.
Yeah, that's definitely true for me. You feel like most people actually stuck with the good changes they made in their life rather than going back to whatever old programs?
Yeah, I think a lot of people did. Yeah. Did you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, for me personally, like COVID broke a lot of like travel patterns for me, where I was spending my time, who I was spending my time with. I mean, you said it, like, just stopping and thinking about, whoa, man, like I don't have to travel as much. Why was I traveling so much before?
Yeah.
Where was that coming from? Was that coming from need, or was that coming from something else?
Yeah.
Right? What was I running to, or what is it running away from? So starting to ask like better questions on the way that we spend our time. And now, it's definitely changed. And sometimes it's uglier, it's dirtier, because now you are way more aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And in the life of an entrepreneur, you have to experiment, you have to try things, you have to test things, you have to meet new people. And that's not always a clean process either. I'm still trying to figure it out.
Yeah. It took a lot of our autopilot off of autopilot.
That's what I mean. Exactly.
Yeah.
You know how they say ignorance is bliss, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the blessing in that is like, okay, well, now whatever you do, you can do it with awareness, even if it's like uncomfortable.
Right.
That uncomfortability is signaling to you. Something that I've really had a hard time accepting, like all of this discomfort in any season of my life. Often I go to, well, what's wrong with me? And like, I've had to learn how to ask better questions of, okay, well, why am I so uncomfortable right now?
Yeah.
Why am I feeling what I'm feeling? Or why is my body telling me it's tired? Should I ignore my body and just keep running?
Yeah.
Or should I do something else? And so I think a lot of people have that.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's understandable that that's the first question. I mean, our whole brain is all about us, right? Like, we are the center of our brain's universe. So it looks at a feeling that it says is uncomfortable or a circumstance, and it puts it right back on us. But that's really huge to start to see, no, this isn't about a me failing. Like, this isn't some shortcoming of me. This is feedback. Even just that is just an amazing question. Like, what is this feedback showing me? And I think a lot of times when we're suffering, our feedback, maybe all the time, our feedback is directly showing us what we're believing. So when we're thinking, I have to hustle. Yes, like, so we feel our thinking. We feel moment to moment thinking and beliefs. When we're believing something that is a lie, essentially, which I think all thoughts really are, thoughts are not the truth. They're just gobbledygook. A lot of times they're reflections of the past, predictions of the future that, like we said, are not accurate. It's just a narration of life, but it's not life itself. It's a narration of life. So we get caught up in these concepts of a kind of person we're supposed to be, or how that was supposed to go, or how this is supposed to go. And when we believe that, when we're living in this conceptual world playing by its rules, like believing it has to hurt. That suffering, that discomfort is waking us up to show us that we're believing. So say you try some new venture and it doesn't go as well as you thought it would go. There's all kinds of ways to be in that, but most of us are going to be like, kind of like you said, like, not what I wanted. This isn't right. Where am I not good enough? And our feelings are just a mirror for that. They're just giving us feedback not for the failure, because it's not a failure. It's just things went how they went, but they're showing us where our mind is arguing and our mind is making it personal.
Yeah, I suffer with this big time. And I think, I guess my question to you is, I have gotten better at observing and cleaning. I use this word cleaning a lot, like through coaching, through the podcast, helps me clean. Yeah. Therapy, right? Talking to my wife and or journaling. Do you recommend that for people? Like, because I think there's a process to get it out of you too. As you observe it, it's like, okay, there it is. Okay, now get it out, clean it, talk about it, get rid of it in some way. Because if you just keep stirring on it too between your ears, at least for me personally, it can grow into something that I then can't control. So by observing it when it's small, and even if it's big, but when it's small, to be able to release it in a way that I now don't have to attach to it. I don't have to let it become me or let it control me. I call it the process of cleaning.
I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, that's a good example of you intuiting your way toward what's helpful for you. Like we were talking about meditation and different, there's not one way, but you found that for yourself and you even have your own word for it. And I think everyone can do that. So that's awesome to see. And I would just add to that, this stuff that we're cleaning and then we're just kind of getting out. What's so helpful is knowing that it isn't the truth. And that doesn't dishonor it. It doesn't mean like, oh, I don't have to look at you. I don't even have to clean you. Like it feels real. So in some sense, we do sometimes have to voice it, get it out, talk about it because we are human beings and thoughts feel so real to us. But there's kind of that, both those two sides of it in a sense of like getting it out, saying, yes, this is a painful thought, but also knowing, like we were talking about before with the belonging and acceptance and all that, and it's not true. It's a psychological little program. Like this is just a place my mind goes. Nothing means anything without a mind making up that it does. So if something doesn't go our way, it does not mean we're a failure. It won't work in the future. It should have worked. It doesn't mean anything. It's just what happened, period. So we can does that make sense? We clean it and get it out as it's showing up for us. And it always shows up for us in a personal way. But we also get to know, is personal and is this feels? It's not personal. It can't be.
For me, I have found so much success in this work. I'm going to call it work. It's personal awareness and development in how I manage my people and my team and the retention we have, the culture we have. Because when we have a problem within a team or somebody's struggling with something, we can start using these tools and starting to ask the right questions and start becoming more aware of what's really going on. And it's allowed us to have such different conversations in the workplace than I would say we were having 5 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Do you feel like is that transcending to others?
I think so for sure. Yes. And you can see why. And it like, again, our natural inclination is to take everything on ourselves. Even somebody on your team who maybe is just doing their job. Everybody to some degree, because it's just how we're designed, everything feels personal. And if, so for you as a leader, for us as leaders to be able to have a different conversation and say, hey, we don't need to talk about blame. We don't even need to rehash it sometimes or whatever. Like, let's just ask a different question and look in a different direction. And it just puts people in that position of like, hey, in business, stuff's going to go well and stuff's going to not go well. That's inevitable. But if that doesn't hold you back as a team or as an entrepreneur, then it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I think often people think like, oh, well, that's too woo-woo. We're not going to talk about our feelings. Like there's not a place for that in the workplace. But I don't think that's it. I think that's a bad excuse. I think what we're really talking about is getting to a core of the problem.
Yeah.
Right? If somebody has a belonging problem and you're asking them to participate in a team and you don't identify that and work through that.
Yeah.
It's not talking about their feelings and making them feel better. It's actually equipping them to fix the one thing or work through the one thing that they perhaps have never addressed in their entire life.
Yes, that's huge.
It's incredibly powerful.
Yes, it's actually looking at the issue. Like we can say, oh, we don't talk about feelings here, but how's that going to work for you? You can say it if you want, but the truth of it is people have feelings and it totally interferes with business. Not even always in a bad way. It interferes in a positive way, but it's an inevitable part of what's going on. Unless you just have robots on your team. If you have human beings, like you just looking, just like you said, it's just about looking at the actual issue.
Yeah, I love it. What else? What else is on your mind?
I don't know. I love this conversation though. It's fun to look at this stuff and hopefully, kind of see it in a different way. I love like the different questions and how simple that is, but how it totally like sets you on a different path. That's so simple. Like, let's just ask.
Here's one thing I will ask you personally, because for me, I have been doing this work for 4 or 5 years. and it's never ending. Dr. Johnson, please just tell me when it ends. Like, I'll go on a season of 3 or 4 months, and I feel like I'm on a season of that right now, where I'm just not doing as much of this cleaning and this work and this development, and I'm not as high vibrating, high vibe as I normally am. Not to say I'm in a bad place, but there's a difference when you are working on this and you're really aware and you're cleaning your thoughts and your energy is at a different place. It never ends though, Doc.
It doesn't end, but I think it keeps elevating. It's like the ground. Yes. I heard this from my financial planner one time. He's like, investing long-term is kind of like walking uphill with a yo-yo. You don't want to stare at the yo-yo because it's going to be up and down, up and down. You want to pay attention to the fact that you're on a slightly inclining hill. So when you look back in 15 years and 20 years, you're like, whoa, I'm somewhere else. But if you watch the yo-yo, you'll never stick it out. And I think it's like that. Every season you go through, and I think we have to go through seasons where we're not so attuned. I think there's probably wisdom in that. Like what you're in right now, maybe you're not meant to constantly be cleaning. You do it. Now you're going to hit a point and say, you know what? It's time to pay more attention here. Perfect. That's just life putting you back in the cycle, but you're headed uphill. You just might not notice it. So it's not like it's never getting you anywhere.
Well, I feel like, and I promote this too, is like the world of high performance has become about routines and wake up at 5 a.m. and, bang out some weights and eat like this and ice bath and this and that. And again, I think I promote a little bit of it, but I think that like the moment you're off of those things or you can't stick to those routines, the mind immediately goes, oh, you're failing. You're not going to have as much success. What's wrong with you? You can't keep up. And I don't think any of that is true. It's just having some more compassion and slowing things down and asking better questions and listening to your body. These are all new things for me right now. So it's good.
It is. It's so much simpler than it looks. When you talk about all those things, I get caught up in some of them too, but it reminds me of social media. It's like there's all these flashy things all over. And then, like my 13-year-old's like, I need this and I need this and I need this. And it's like, whoa, you don't need those shoes. You don't need all these things. But that's what's shown. And I think it can, for adults, what you just mentioned, all those things are our own version of that. I need to meditate and then breathe and then do the bath and all of this. And
yes.
And it can feel good to do some of that stuff, no question. But what you just said is so key. Like they are not giving us anything that we don't already have. They might feel good in and of themselves. They are not the ticket to success, because if you believe that, it is a trap. And I just don't even believe they are. They're things that feel good and might make you creative and feel good in a moment, but they're never meant to, they're going to just become a prison. And we don't need more things we have to do. We have everything we need when our mind is calm. And we all know this is the flow state that every performer wants to be in. That is not a state of gathering all kinds of stuff. It's a state of like a quiet mind where you feel like you're just being lived by life. That's where the really good ideas and all of that come from.
I love that. Lived by life. That's so good. Dr. Johnson, any final thoughts from your end to the audience before I ask you a final question?
I don't know. I think that last bit's pretty big to see. We can add all kinds of stuff. We can add, but I think peak performance, happiness, success, like peace, they're really more subtractive. It's like when all this clutter, when all that kind of settles down, that's when we arrive at what we're looking for. It's not that we need to go out and add so much.
I love it. For you, what does it mean to live a rich life?
Means that there can be seeking and adding and doing for fun. We're designed to want to live and play in the world, and that can be super fun, but we don't want to expect to get everything from it. We already have the really good stuff. So, and I think that's huge in business and in anything, when we can see what we're doing as a service and it's like just a fun playground rather than something we need to go do to prove our worth or whatever else it might be. That's a really rich life.
So beautiful. cleaning for me today. Love it.
Awesome.
If people want to reach out to you, connect with you, what's the best place to do that and find you?
My website is dramyjohnson.com. It's just dramyjohnson.com, and can find my podcast and everything there.
And you do a lot of great stuff on Instagram and social media. So definitely follow her. She's got great content, free content, so many things, good ideas for the day. I love what you're doing, and continue to encourage you, and I'm honored that you're here today. So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.